Part 2 of channeling my highest self. In embracing the space of both and, it is also this calling to remember something ancient, which I have had many reminders this year to tune into something older, to better explain and feel through my definition of spirit and spirituality and why it has never aligned with modern day religion, why even paganism is too small of a word to encompass what I feel. It is simple. There was a time when there was no delineation between magic and science. We did not have a word for science. Both things just were, and so it is. People did not try to prove and justify all of the things that we took for granted. It was only when we started taking them for granted and needing to undermine and decide who could hold and replicate the power that was intuitive to some that we created science in order to better understand, experiment, explain, rationalize, justify, make provable that which was already known. And it is from that place, when I speak from a knowing, when I stand in my truest presence, when I connect to the real spirit within me and around me, it is in that knowing that I stand. It is one that no longer needs to be justified or scientifically explained or reasoned away. When people came to the old healer, before they long called her a witch, before they tried to replicate her medicines in a lab, they called her a healer because that was what she did. People came to her and she served a purpose based on what she was faced with, and she did her best. And I'm sure she did not always save all of those who came to her, but I know that she always did what was held in the highest intention, in the highest hopes for the person. All that guided her was the wisdom from before, were her listening ears to people who had tried things previously. It was her inner knowing and that connection, I believe, that guided her. And it was also witnessing the person in front of her and listening to them and understanding. And it is all these soft skills that we have so long dismissed and diminished and tried to codify in DSMs and psychiatry and the things that we have tried to medicate that could be forms of genius that were not given a place to stretch its wings, that were not given a safe place to land. And so we trapped it in a room padded with a straitjacket to keep you from hurting yourself when your mind is the only tool you ever needed to do so, because it was what told you that you were wrong and broken. It is in that moment of realizing that there was a line drawn between the old and the new for the sake of persecution, for the sake of keeping wisdom not secret. They did not persecute that woman and call her witch because she did harm. They persecuted her because she did that which they could not explain, that which they could not control, that which they could not recreate of their own hands, because they themselves were so disconnected from their desire to do good that all they could do was project their lack of internal empathy onto others. And because of their pain, they could only project it into a way that caused pain to others. So desperate were they to be witnessed in what they were struggling. So desperate were they to maybe visit this person, this healer in the first place, and get that guidance. But that fear, those structures, those people around them that maybe did not support them in seeking support, those were the people that allowed them to perpetuate this internal narrative in their mind that they could not be safe unless their pain was felt. But rather than feel their own pain, they wanted someone else to feel it. And so they pushed and they persecuted and they ran people out of town and they burned them at the stake and they caused mass tragedy, and they still do to this day. People who are desperate to be heard and witnessed, but have no outlet and no empathy for themselves and no sense of vulnerability and acceptance of their own grace and no self-responsibility for their own mistakes will always find a way to make their pain manifest in others so that they, in their barest form of empathy, can say, well, if I am in pain, then you must be too. And at least in this way, I am not alone. And I am here to remind you that you are not alone, but you need not project your pain in order to feel surrounded by love, in order to feel held in community, in order to feel like you belong. You can be different. You can feel differently than those around you. You can have good days and bad. You can be going through the hardest shit of your life right now. And that does not mean that people cannot witness it. You deserve to be witnessed in the hard times. You do not need to wait to build a shelter until after the storm has passed. Seek shelter now. Find a tree. Find a human. Wail and scream for help if you must. But let your voice out. Let that pain be heard, if by nothing else the universe around you. Let it comfort you. Let it let you know, just like the smoke of the incense, just like the moth in the night, just like the sound of crickets on the summertime breeze. You are never alone. Though you may feel that way, you will always have yourself. And the moment you get to look at that version of yourself you're so afraid to face, maybe you can't do it alone. Maybe you need someone to hold a light with you as you face it. As you look underneath the boogeyman in the bed, you need someone next to you with a flashlight. Let me be that person. But once you face that part of you and you see it was never there to do your harm, it was only the fear of it that did harm to you, you will accept that you can be whole, not by banishing the parts that you deem broken, but by integrating all of you so that you may feel whole again. Even the parts that you once labeled and blamed and shamed and judged, and maybe were judged by others and had that judgment reinforced by society, by the communities that you were never really a part of and never felt like you belonged to. Those are the pieces that will lead you back to you. And on another note, I have never been one to keep my mouth shut. Ever since I was a little girl, the teacher called me Butterfly. And I did not know why until she said, "Your mouth moves at the speed at which the butterfly's wings flap up and down and hold it aloft." And I could have taken it as an insult at that time, but in the moment I took it for what it was, the truth. I cannot help that my mind races to the truth. It races for an answer. It jumps to the question, and it cannot live without asking it. It does not care for the answer. It only needs the question to be heard, and knowing that the answer will reveal itself sometimes in the very question it asks. Once upon a time in high school, in my AP literature class, I had asked my professor what I was to do. I was feeling so frustrated and resentful that I was one of the only people participating in the discussion around the text that we had read, that I was the only one raising my voice and questioning the deeper meaning and challenging the author's narrative. And I did not understand why no one else would speak their mind, would speak their opinion, or would jump in to answer my question. Why people were so few and far between to make the most of the education that the world and past experience had presented to them. And I came to her, frankly, quite exhausted and exasperated, desperate to understand. And I told her, I cannot keep speaking to the ceiling, hoping the walls will tune in. And she said, "Hélène, you are speaking to the sky so that the birds may listen, and so that wherever they nest, they may spread the word. Like a seed dropped by a bird in a distant wood, as wicked foretold. May the birds that heard me that day drop those seeds, and may a single seed bloom into one day a grove, so that others may also find the seed of new beginning, the sword of truth, and the wisdom and courage within, quite frankly, to be messy, to say the thing, to do the hardest thing that we can do. Even though we may not be ready to be perceived, we must let ourselves be witnessed so that we can feel seen. I do not care about your perception. I cannot care about your perception because it will not change what I know and who I am. Just like we need a little light in the darkness so that we can appreciate the shapes of the night, we also get to let a little light shine upon our mess. We live in shades of gray. There is no pure light. There is no pure dark in this world. We have to show up on a gradient. And so maybe today you are 80% messy and 20% stitched together with your shit wrapped up in a neat little bow. And maybe tomorrow you'll finally get that number up to 95% and you will feel put together, lipstick on, mascara. You will have your favorite boots on and you will walk in. And then you will come home and you will wonder, what will tonight hold? And in that night, you cannot know what was once foretold, but you know that you are ready to embrace the unknown and the uncertainty before you, because you know that for every shade of gray, there is a mixture of white and black, that there is always white in the darkest shade of gray. In the lightest shade of gray, there will always be a little spot of black, because otherwise it would be pure white. And may I remind you that white is not a color. White in its purest form is the absence of color. And let me tell you, I do not want to live in a world without color. I want the world as colorful as can be. I want contrast. I want texture. I want both. And I want mess and I want beauty. And I want beauty in that mess. And I want rough edges on the diamond that I use to drill through the scaffolding of the society that has held us back, to drill through the walls that have kept us caged, because they have not been a home or a hearth. They have never been able to replicate that which we have always known deep in our bones, that which nature has always found a way to perfect through its own experimentation. We have tried so hard in those labs and in those scientific experiments to replicate what nature always found a way to do on its own. And rather than listen, we removed ourselves so far from it that we tried to distill it in the hopes of playing God without ever getting to know what that really meant. We were so busy playing God that we forgot that we already were.